Good evening, and welcome to Rising Reality. I'm Tim Kaiser, and my co-host is Crystal Turner. Hello, Crystal.
Hi, Tim. How are you doing?
Oh, wonderful.
Good. That's great.
So,
I'm so ready to get into the mix right here with this show tonight and, you know, lift a veil on what's been going on with the Bush family over the last, 70 plus years now?
yeah, pretty much a long time.
Mm-hmm.
At the behest of people who have been doing it for longer.
Right. Um,
So, this is a listener-supported radio station, and they do appreciate donations, and so do I, because it keeps me on the air. It keeps all the rest of the radio shows on the air on Revolution Radio here at freedomslips.com. So there is seed packs available. There is archive access, which gets you pretty much instant. I think the most of the shows are posted within a day or two of when they air, and they are available for all the shows all across the board. For I think it's for something a month, maybe almost $5 a month. Um, so check into that if you will, if you like to keep the station on the air. Um, Once again, this is Revising Reality, and I want to open up if we're talking about the Bushes first. So I have a YouTube video here with talking about Bush's grandfather and how he helped Hitler rise to power, and I want to play that to start.
Sounds like a plan to me.
For how the American branch of the Illuminati aided and abetted Adolf Hitler, and how the Bushes were the first family when it came to treason.
I've been an investigative reporter and a journalist for 35 years. I've worked in every major media market in the United States, and I've written for more than 100 newspapers and magazines nationally and internationally. So last September 17th, I became the first journalist in U.S. history to go to the U.S. National Archives and the Library of Congress and pore over the thousands of pages of documents in both places to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt or any refutation of the facts that Prescott Bush, the grandfather of George W. Bush, and George Herbert Walker, his maternal great-grandfather for whom his daddy is named, were Nazi traitors to the country who should have been tried for treason. 2 weeks ago, in early August, a major world newspaper, The Guardian of London, finally got on the story internationally, and they flew a renowned reporter of theirs named Duncan Campbell over to Washington to take me back to the archives and Library of Congress so that they could verify that these explosive documents were real and I didn't have forged copies. Prescott Bush was the grandfather of George W. Bush and the father of George Herbert Walker Bush, and George Herbert Walker Bush is named for his father-in-law, George Herbert Walker. Prescott Bush graduated from Yale in 1917 and was in Skull and Bones with E. Roland Harriman, who was the younger brother of W. Averill Harriman. The Bush family really had nothing going. They were essentially social climbers and opportunistic people. At the time that Prescott Bush met Dorothy Walker, he was a tire salesman. And George Herbert Walker, as all fathers do when their daughter's going to marry someone, said in his heart, you know, it's not an appropriate thing socially that my daughter marry a tire salesman. So he brought Prescott Bush first into Brown Brothers Harriman and then Union Banking Corporation. In actuality, it was anything but a bank. It was essentially a Nazi money laundering operation that had a lot of tentacles into a lot of different other businesses. They owned a shipping line called Hamburg American Line, for example, which was the first Nazi front business seized, although the line was no longer operational in 1942. In the early 1930s, it transported Nazi spies into the U.S., and then their promotional ads offered cash rewards to any American citizens who would go back on Hamburg American lines and proselytize for Hitler. 8 months after the U.S. had entered the war, the New York Herald Tribune ran a front-page article, Hitler's Angel has $3 million in U.S. bank. And it caused a major scandal and just rocked the world of politics. Brown Brothers Harriman, which George Herbert Walker and Prescott Bush were affiliated with and partners in, worked with I.G. Farben, which operated Auschwitz. Prescott Bush, he did a number of things that were not only anti-American, but were pro-Hitler, and he did all that he could to proselytize for Hitler and the rise of his Third Reich, because the largest client, Fritz Thyssen, of his patron, W. Averill Harriman, dictated what kind of behavior he would practice to enhance his own career. So he was put on the board of directors of Union Banking Corporation, and he was also a shareholder in Union Banking Corporation along with E. Roland Harriman. But what's interesting about what the documents show is that they clearly state that all of the shareholders were phantom shareholders for Fritz Thyssen and did his bidding directly. So the point I'm making is it's not as if they bought these shares of stock as a passive investment to hopefully profit from the war. They were directly doing the bidding of the individual who built the Nazi war machine. Some very shocking documents that I saw at the Library of Congress 2 weeks ago on August 10th. On August 9th, excuse me, had to do with the hearings of the McCormick-Dickstein Committee of November 1934, show that Prescott Bush and the DuPont family, the Remington family, and J.P. Morgan tried to overthrow the U.S. government, assassinate FDR, and put a Hitler-style fascist state in place. I have in my possession testimony from the McCormick-Dickstein Committee in November of 1934 by one of the fascist plotters that they were going to follow Hitler's model exactly and impose martial law on the United States, round up unemployed people that were worthless to the economy and troublemakers and Jews and put them into internment camps. And their plan was, if necessary, to exterminate the people that could not be part of the effort. The only reason the coup attempt in 1934 didn't succeed is that they hired the wrong general to lead it, General Smedley Butler, the great Marine hero, two-time Congressional Medal of Honor winner, who worked with the plotters just long enough to be able to identify who they were and then blew the whistle on them to Congress. Incredibly, after being warned by the FBI and the Justice Department and the Treasury Department to cease and desist in their Nazi dealings, they had continued them until 1951. There had been 28 additional seizures of Nazi assets and Nazi business fronts between late 1942 and 1951, and that they had moved Nazi assets into Switzerland, Brazil, Argentina, and Panama, and they had continued to do business with their primary Nazi patron, who was Fritz Thyssen, who backed Hitler beginning in 1921 and who was the wealthiest man in Germany, and a steel and coal baron who, with his partner Friedrich Flick, essentially built the Nazi war machine along with I.G. Farben. In 1951, when Fritz Thyssen died in Argentina, Union Banking Corporation was liquidated by the U.S. government, and Prescott Bush received $1.5 million for his holdings in his Nazi business, and that was the beginning of the Bush family fortune for all intents and purposes. George Bush doesn't take his philosophical foundation from the Bible or the teachings of Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount. George Bush takes his inspiration from what he learned in Skull and Bones and from the Thule Society that Hitler and Goebbels and Goring cut their teeth in, Bohemian Grove, these evil organizations that perpetrate the ugly things that these criminals are doing to this country for which they must be held accountable. Now you look at the Republican National Convention this week, and you bring in Arnold Schwarzenegger to speak last night. Schwarzenegger is the son of a Nazi. He has praised Nazis. He has praised Hitler. He talked last night in terms like, we will not falter, we will not waver, we will win this war on terror.
He's a leader who doesn't flinch, who doesn't waver, and does not back down.
Well, that's exactly the speeches that Hitler made after the Reichstag fire. Terrorism and the homeland being under attack are precisely the issues that Hitler used to subvert everything within the German system of government. This is a criminal regime. They not only emulate Hitler, but its genesis comes from Hitler. And I defy anyone, a historian, journalist, author, anyone, to come forward and disprove my premise that you cannot differentiate Hitler's invasion of Poland in 1939 and the Reichstag fire and his attempt to dominate the world from George W. Bush's unprovoked invasion of Iraq and subversion of the Constitution through the Patriot Act after 9/11, which I submit is his Reichstag fire. Karl Rove and his minions are every bit the masters of propaganda that Joseph Goebbels was. They literally took lessons from Goebbels and Goring about how to create such brilliant propaganda that unreality can become reality, and reality can be subverted to fantasy political subterfuge right before your eyes. So there's just an endless broken record that is leading up to the present era, that the Bush family has had a single goal for 100 years, which is to become the most powerful family on the planet and to rule the world. And they are on the verge of doing that under George W. Bush. It's critical that every citizen of this country rise up and do something, because the day of reckoning is at hand, and these people are Nazis. They are practicing Nazi philosophy. They are mimicking Nazi tactics, and time is running out.
So, this is
That
not
was
quite
very
over yet,
interesting, Tim. Very interesting. I'm
isn't
just,
it?
yeah, I admire how, these people that were researching and sharing the truth before you and I, and many of the ones that we listen to today, they had this stuff pinpoint down.
Oh yeah.
Um, I love this stuff.
Is it Dr. Beater? I don't remember how to spell his name, but Trinity talks about him a lot.
We need Trinity on here so she can share some of her special information with us.
Yeah, she told me this morning that she would, but I don't know if she remembers. So maybe she won't. I don't know.
Oh no, we'll carry on with the show anyway. The show must go on.
Absolutely. There is a little bit more to this. There's a little bit more information that he has on this video here. Just a little bit more, but it's worth listening to as soon as I get to the part, because for some reason they built
about how the Bush family.
Here we go. We got it now.
Why haven't the networks made a TV movie of the week about how the Bush family made their family fortune? The movie could be called The Awful Truth, starring George W.'s great-grandfather, Samuel P. Bush, whose Buckeye Steel Castings Company supplies parts for Edward Harriman's railroads, who in turn provides rail shipments for John D. Rockefeller's Standard Oil, who in turn gets monopoly financing from the Rothschilds. The movie could be made into a TV series starring Samuel's son, Prescott Bush, as the managing director of a Nazi steel manufacturing plant in Poland called Silesian Consolidated Steel. In episode 1, Prescott Bush forwards American financing to his German partner Fritz Thyssen through the Union Banking Corporation in New York. Fritz Thyssen arranges a contract with Nazi Germany's IG Farben Company for free Jewish slave labor in Bush's steel manufacturing plant at the Auschwitz concentration camp. Episode 2 shows Skull and Bonesman Prescott Bush and Avril Harriman getting caught under Trading with the Enemy Act as the U.S. government moves in and seizes all of their shares in Union Banking Corporation. In episode 3, Prescott's son, the first George Bush, is director of the CIA. George puts drug king Manuel Noriega on the CIA payroll, allowing thousands of tons of cocaine to hit the streets of America via the Panama Canal. In episode 4, George's son, the second George Bush, becomes partners with Osama bin Laden's older brother, Salem bin Laden, in a Texas oil company called Arbusto Energy. Episode 5 introduces George W.'s shady younger brother, Neil Bush, ripping off the elderly in the Silverado savings and loan scandal that cost U.S. taxpayers $1.3 billion. In episode 6, the Florida election is fixed by George W.'s older brother, Jeb Bush, who puts brother George into the top job at the White House, which brings us back to Auschwitz and the concluding episode with George W. Bush visiting the slave labor camp where his grandfather helped build the Bush family fortune on free Jewish slave labor.
Sites are a sobering reminder that of the power of evil and the need for people to resist evil.
So that's the end of that. And I just wanted to add that last part in there because I thought that was pretty powerful summary of, glossing over what the Bushes have been up to, like how they made their rise to power, who they were in bed with at the beginning, and we're talking over 70 years ago because the Walkers were tied to it before the Bushes were, as Matt Walker married Bush.
Mm-hmm.
So it's scary to see how long that some of the modern arms of the control mechanisms, were in place for this long. I mean, it's interesting. They're all over the place. They've been around for a very long time. They're, I mean, you could trace them back to far, far, far more beginnings, very, very far in the past. So if you want to look at it, from an more interesting perspective, you could call these people the descendants, or the original ones, the descendants of the Hyksos pharaohs. I think it's Hykos. I think it's Hykos, and they came out of ancient Egypt, but they were descendants. They were Celtic. They were descendants of the Atlanteans, and you can trace the control system all the way back to there and beyond. And there's also different parts of it, but we're talking about the British. I wouldn't say the British, but we'll just say that the European royal families, because they're the kind of the heart and soul of this thing. Would you agree with that, Crystal?
I have my ideas on that, Egyptian origination theory. I don't know how much I buy into that. I I would have to do more research, independent research, before I could give an educated answer to that question, Tim, honestly.
Yeah. For anybody wanting to look into that, I would recommend Michael Tassarian has a couple of books called The Irish Origins of Civilization, and there's another author. I didn't think it was Jordan Maxwell. There's another guy who wrote about it as well, um, and I don't remember what his name was, because I do have that book somewhere. I'll have to look it up and post it. But they're very fascinating reads, and there's a lot of in-depth research coming out of that. It's very interesting. It's a very deep subject because it goes back so long, and it makes the research much more challenging. A lot of archaeology and stuff too. But back to the Bushes, they definitely have some very dirty, dark secrets. So I have a quote. I have a quote for you. It's the government must put the most modern medical means in the service of this knowledge. Those who are physically and mentally unhealthy and unworthy must not perpetuate their suffering in the body of their children. The prevention of the faculty and the opportunity to procreate on the part of the physically degenerate and mentally sick over a period of 600 years would free humanity from an immeasurable misfortune. So that's like absolutely eugenics right there. And then the next quote is, the per capita income gap between the developed and the developing countries is increasing, in large part to the result of higher birth rates in the poorer countries. Famine in India, unwanted babies in the United States, poverty that seemed to form an unbreakable chain for millions of people. How should we tackle these problems? It is quite clear that one of the major challenges of the 1970s will be to curb the world's fertility. These two quotations are alike in their mock show of concern for human suffering and their cynical remedy for it. Big Brother must prevent the unworthy or unwanted people from living. Let us now further inquire. Well, I don't want to. I'm looking for. Where is it? Never mind. So we have a very interesting here. Sorry, I
I'm
got.
sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say we have a very interesting tie here from the background of our president, because the second quoted author is George Bush, came to share the outlook of the first, that of Hitler. That's what I was looking for, because it's Hitler. The first quote is Hitler. The second quote is Bush. Both of those, these are two people who obviously were very alike in their temperament, as the video, alleged, like the guy, the researcher in the video. You can find that linked at my website, by the way, at revisingreality.com, so that we have the show notes up there for everybody. But I mean, these people, they have some very interesting connections. That is very, how shall I put this? Like George Bush and Hitler both had the same kind of idea of master race. And that's one of the things, they're very pure genetic people. That's what they want. Like that's one of their goals. When George Bush was elected president in 1980, vice president, I should say, Texas mystery man William Will Sharps Ferris III took over management of all Bush's personal wealth in a blind trust. Known as one of the richest men in Texas, Will Ferris keeps his business affairs under the most intense secrecy. Only the source of his immense wealth is known, not its employment. Will Ferris has long been Bush's closest friend and confidant. He is also the unique private host to Britain's Queen Elizabeth II. Ferris owns and boards the studs which mate with the Queen's mares. That is her public rationale when it comes to America and stays in Ferris's house. It is a vital link in the mind of this Anglophile President Bush. President Bush can count on Will Ferris not to betray the violent secrets surrounding the Bush family many, for Ferris's own family misfortune was made out of the same Hitler project, a nightmarish partnership with George Bush's father. On March 25, 1942, U.S. Attorney General Thurman Arnold announced that William Stamps Ferris, grandfather of the president's money manager, had pled no contest to charges of criminal conspiracy with the Nazis. Ferris was also the principal manager of a worldwide cartel between Standard Oil Company of New Jersey and the IG Farben concern. The Mertz enterprise had opened Auschwitz slave labor camp on June 14, 1940, to produce artificial rubber and gasoline from coal. The Hitler government supplied political opponents and Jews as slaves who were worked near death and then murdered. Arnold disclosed that the Standard Oil of New Jersey, later known as Exxon, still exists, but Ferris was president and chief executive, had agreed to stop hiding from the United States patents for artificial rubber that the company had provided to the Nazis. A Senate investigating committee under later U.S. President Harry Truman of Missouri had called Arnold to testify at hearings on the U.S. corporation's collaboration with the Nazis. The senators expressed outrage at the cynical way Ferris was continuing an alliance with the Hitler regime that had begun back in 1933 when Ferris became chief of Jersey Standard. Didn't he know there was a war on? The Justice Department laid before the committee a letter which went to Standard President Ferris as vice president shortly after the beginning of World War II, September 1st, 1939 in Europe. The letter concerned a renewal of earlier agreements with the Nazis. Report on European trip. Dear Mr. Ferris, I stayed in France until September 17th. In England, I met by appointment at the Royal Dutch Shell Oil Company gentlemen from Holland, and a general agreement was reached with the necessary changes in our relations with the IG Farben in view of the state of war. The Dutch Royal Shell Group is essentially British. I have also settled several meetings with the British Air Ministry. I required help to obtain the necessary permission to go to Holland. After decisions with the American ambassador Joseph Kennedy, the situation cleared completely. The gentleman in the Air Ministry very kindly assisted me later to re-entering England. Pursuant to these arrangements, I was able to keep my appointments in Holland, where I had 3 days of discussion with the representative of IG. They delivered me some alignments of some 2,000 foreign patents, and we did our best to work out complete plans for a modus vivendi which could operate through the term of the war, whether or not the U.S. came in. And earlier in that video, they actually mentioned an ambassador who worked with Bush and is tied to the concentration camps. William Ferris III, the guy just mentioned in that letter. He was his family was tied, and his immense fortunes of his grandfather were tied directly to the Bushes as well as the Nazi Party. And nobody's really ever heard of William Farish. So this guy is a very interesting character. I implore you to look him up. There's actually a link also in the show notes for that. So there's some very interesting stuff here. Crystal, you have something to share?
Yeah, I do. There was something I was reading just momentarily ago while you were talking. Um, Sorry about that, but there was
Okay.
something I was looking at, and it is something I posted on my Facebook wall. I'm not sure if you want to add it to the show notes or
Yes,
whatever
absolutely.
whatever you want to do. There's more links on my Facebook page at Crystal Turner that um, you can add, or whomever's listening can feel free to venture into their own research from those links provided. I wanted to read a little bit of this article here, if you don't mind, called "A Nazi in the Pocket is Worth Four in the Bush Family."
Excellent.
And I had also found a book by Webster Tarpley, which was co-authored by another person, Chitkin, or I can't remember right off. But it was the unauthorized biography of George Bush,
Hmm.
and there was a it's listed there on my Facebook, and I think chapter 3 deals with the eugenics, which you were just talking about, William Farish. But let's go into this article here for a moment. Um, and again, you can find a link there on my Facebook tab.
Yeah.
A Nazi in the Pocket is Worth Four in the Bush Family. Part 1. What is interesting about the history of the Bush family are the connections. Avril Harriman, which I haven't heard anyone speak about that person tonight.
Yeah, not yet.
Alan Dulles, is that correct?
Duels. I usually call them duels.
Dulles?
That's how you pronounce it. I'm not sure though.
I'll find out.
Yes, yeah.
The Rockefellers, the start of the oil connection. James Baker III, I haven't heard anyone mentioning him. Gulf Oil, you did mention. When you mention Exxon, that's the first thing I think of. And
Yeah.
Pennzoil. Osama bin Laden, and on it goes. A lapse of memory. And this article was written by William Bowles. Um, May the 7th, 2003. Information Clearinghouse. It's as well to remember that the web never forgets, and that is one thing I love about the internet. You know, we have those archives and Wayback Machine. I
Oh yeah.
really am
Wayback
appreciative
Machine.
of having those.
Wayback Machine is awesome. If
Yes,
nobody's
it is.
ever heard of that, because I saw my mother using it, I was like, "What's that?" And she was like, "Oh, this is Wayback Machine," but that was a while ago. The thing is
Mhm.
awesome. Like it just you can type in any web page and go use the web page, the Wayback Machine, and you can find things that's already been like gone off the internet. Like it's archived like a lot of stuff, like a lot of like research that's kind of just disappeared. Like you can find through what Wayback Machine.
Yeah, the ancient, really good stuff before things were changed into misinformation and disinformation. That's where you find the really great research material, in my opinion, at least. And it goes on to say in here, let's get started. It's as well to remember that the web never forgets. At least the U.S. president should take note of this fact and be careful of his utterances and how they can come back to haunt him. In fact, 4 generations of Bush family history and too many skeletons in too many closets to count are to be found on the web. And given all the pulpit pounding, more of which below, by old W and his minions over the dubious moral character of Saddam and his cronies, much of which has been underpinned the justification for the invasion and occupation of Iraq. It's as well to compare the two sets of rogues. Not surprisingly, there's a little there's little to choose between the two, except that in the case of the Bush gang, they have a pedigree in perfidy which extends back almost a century and 4 generations. Like I said at the beginning of the show, 70 plus years,
Yep.
almost a century. and 4 generations that make Saddam look positively angelic by comparison. Prescott Bush setting a family example. And that was something I discussed with Tim. I think I discussed this with you over a week ago about how we really
Yes.
wanted to drill into the grandfather, first of all.
Yeah.
In a previous piece, and they linked the article there, a quote I used mentioned Prescott Bush, the present Prez's grandpa. So I decided to do a little researching to see what other, I don't know what that is, chiming in right now. To
Oh,
see what
sorry.
other, okay, yeah. To see what other dirty little secrets sabotage. To see what other dirty little secrets the Bush family have hidden in the dark recesses of the World Wide Web. And lo and behold, there's a load of stuff out there. 7,630 links to be precise. And you can just imagine this was written well over a decade ago. This was written in 2003. Can you imagine? That's probably quadrupled by now.
Yeah.
According to good old Google, just on Grandpa Prescott Bush alone. Geronimo. It's 1918, and well, students, they're always up to innocent pranks. It seems Grandpa Bush set his grandson some fine family precedents, starting with digging up Geronimo's skull. Haven't heard anybody mention that. In 1918, Prescott Bush and 2 companions crept into the cemetery near Fort Sill and pried open the grave of Geronimo. And I think that right there, in my opinion, digging up the skull of a Native American hero is about as Nazi as you can get, in
Yes.
my opinion. I think that's just damn right screwed up, to put it, you know, as mildly as I possibly can. That's, if I
Yes.
can, fucked up, okay? The head was taken out, spiffed up, and forwarded to New Haven. And I'm going to assume that's New Haven, Connecticut,
Yeah.
where it was given pride of place for goofy rituals, bullshit satanic, occultic, Nazi rituals that have been attended by generations of Bushes and a veritable army of powerful types. And there's a link there, you know, to research on your own with that. The Apache Nation, which was left of it anyway, was not amused. And why would any self respecting person, individual of American Indian descent, be amused about this? I'm not amused.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll give we'll forgive Grandpa Bush his juvenile pranks. Now I don't forgive that. I'm sorry. But it seems that this set the scene for the rest of his miserable life until his death in 1972 from carcinoma of the lung. From skulls to Zyklon B, and this might be something you're familiar with. This Zyklon B thing,
Sounds so
Tim?
familiar. It
It
sounds very
does. It does. But it seems that great grandpa George Walker, Prescott Bush's father, was also in on the business of making money out of death, like great grandpa, like great grandson. Of course, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, right?
yes.
George Walker, GW's great grandfather, also set up the takeover of the Hamburg America line, a cover for IG Farben's Nazi espionage unit in the United States. In Germany, IG Farben was most famous for putting the gas in gas chambers. It was a producer of Zyklon B and other gases used on victims of the Holocaust. The Bush family was not unaware of the nature of their investment partners. They hired Alan Dulles. I don't think I'm
Oh.
pronouncing that right.
Oh. Wait. Noreen told me how to do that. What is it? Dooley. It's.
Dulles.
Yeah.
Is that correct? Yeah,
Doulas.
I
Yeah.
thought so. The future head of the CIA, to hide the funds they were making from Nazi investments and the funds they were sending to Nazi Germany rather than rather than divest. And there's a source there for that also. Banking on fascism. It doesn't stop, does it? As Prescott Bush, son of George, continued in the grand tradition of skullduggery, literal, by also doing dealings with the Nazis. On October the 20th, 1942, excuse me, the U.S. Alien Property Custodian, under the Trading with the Enemy Act, seized the shares of the Union Banking Corporation, of which Prescott Bush was a director and a shareholder. The largest shareholder was E. Roland Harriman. Bush was also the managing partner of Brown Brothers Harriman, a leading Wall Street investment firm. The UBC was established to send American capital to Germany to finance the reorganization of its industry under the Nazis. Their leading German partner was the notorious Nazi industrialist Fritz Thyssen. And I'm not sure, but I think I heard someone mention that earlier in the show.
Yes, yes. We were talking about Thiessen being the guy who built the Nazi war machine.
That's great. So, not great that he built that, but great that
Yeah.
that was mentioned. So we know
Oh,
that he is a Nazi industrialist. Go ahead, Tim.
I was just gonna say. By the way, I have all the Facebook, all the links you posted on Facebook. I have already listed on the website. I was pretty good about getting all of them. So there
Thank you
is
so much.
this article is listed. It's underneath the Orion Talk Radio Network video about the four generations of treason of the Bush family. Anyways,
Thank you.
not a
All
problem.
right, I'm gonna finish up with this. It won't take but a few moments longer.
For it.
Who wrote a book admitting much of this called "I Paid Hitler," and I'm gonna find that link in just a moment when Tim starts his ranting again. Among the
Hey,
companies, yeah, I'm just joking. I'm trying to keep some humor and comedy going here.
you got
Among Among the companies financed was the Sicilian American Corporation, which was also managed by Prescott Bush and by his father in law, George Herbert Walker, who supplied W. I hate that W. I mean, I'm trying to read along and I'm like, wow, that's just really sticking out to me with his name. The company was vital in supplying coal to the Nazi war industry. It too was seized as a Nazi front on November the 17th, 1942. I'm going to do some more research into that as well. The largest company Bush's UBC helped finance was the German Steel Trust. Going to do research on him. Responsible for between one third and one half of Nazi iron and explosives, I'm sorry. Prescott Bush was also a director of the Harriman 15 Corporation. This one owned largely by Roland's brother, Averill Harriman, which owned about a third of the consolidated Sicilian Steel Corporation, the rest owned by Friedrich Flick, a member of Himmler's circle of friends who donated to the SS. And there's a source there that you can research. What is interesting about the history of the Bush family are the connections. I agree. April Harriman, Alan Dulles, the Rockefellers, the start of the oil connections, James Baker III, Gulf Oil, Pennzoil, Osama bin Laden, on and on it goes. Seems like I've read this before. It looks like this. This will have to be part one of an ongoing series on the Bush dynasty and their dirty dealings. Double Dutch. The story of the steel magnate and billionaire bankroller of the Nazis, Fritz Thyssen, and his Bush family connections is so incredible that it deserves to be turned into a movie, obviously not by Hollywood. It all starts with John Loftus. That's a good person to research. A
yes. I remember you
former,
mentioned him last episode.
we did?
Yeah, I think didn't
Okay.
you? Yes, yes,
I
yes.
may
You did.
have. Thank you, Tim.
You're
A
welcome.
former U.S. Department of Justice Nazi war crimes prosecutor who is the source of the following. From 1945 until 1949, one of the lengthiest and now it appears most futile interrogations of a Nazi war crime suspect began in the American zone of occupied Germany. And that looks like, to me, when I look at American zone of occupied Germany, I look at my mental processes it as a Zog. That's what it looks like to me. The
Hmm.
interrogation of billionaire steel magnate Fritz Thyssen, the man whose steel combine was the cold heart of the Nazi war machine. They were trying to find out what had happened to Thyssen's billions, but without success. Why? What the Allied investigators never understood was that they were not asking Thiessen the right question. And that makes a lot of sense to me that they didn't ask the right question.
Yeah.
Thiessen did not need any foreign bank accounts because his family secretly owned an entire chain of banks. See? He did not have to transfer his Nazi assets at the end of World War II. All he had to do was transfer ownership, excuse me, guys, transfer the ownership documents, stocks, bonds, deeds, and trusts from his bank in Berlin through his bank in Holland to his American friends in New York City. So there's transfer, of course. Prescott Bush and Herbert Walker, Thiesen's partners in crime, were the father and father in law of a future president of the United States. And the emphasis here by the author is George W. Bush. Okay?
Hmm.
The British and American interrogators may have gravely underestimated Thiessen, but they nonetheless knew they were being lied to. Their suspicions focused on one Dutch bank, in particular the Bank voor Handel en Schriftvaart in Rotterdam. This bank did a lot of business with the Thiessens over the years. In 1923, as a favor to him, the Rotterdam Bank loaned the money to build the very first Nazi party headquarters in Munich. Munich, right? Is that right?
Munich. Yeah.
Munich. Okay. If the investigators realized that the U.S. intelligence chief in post war Germany, Alan Dulles, was also the Rotterdam's bank's lawyer, they might have asked some very interesting questions. They did not know that Thiessen was Dulles' client as well, nor did they ever realize that it was Alan Dulles' other client, Baron Kurt von Schroeder, who was a Nazi trustee for the Thiessen companies, which now claimed to be owned by the Dutch. The Rotterdam Bank was at the heart of Dulles' cloaking scheme, and he guarded its secrets jealously. The Dutch connection remained unexplored until 1994 when I published the book The Secret War Against the Jews. That I'm going to find that and read it and post it for whomever might be interested. As a matter of historical curiosity, I mentioned that Fritz Thyssen and indirectly the Nazi Party had obtained their early financing from Brown Brothers Harriman and its affiliate, the Union Banking Corporation. Union Bank, in turn, was the Bush family's holding company for a number of other entities, including the Holland American Trading Company. There are so many twists and turns to this story that this is not the place to go into all the labyrinthine links between the Nazis, the Bush, and the CIA via Alan Dulles, or indeed a host of other corporate connections. But this final quote from the same source gives you an idea of just how much money is involved. And it seems to me personally that all of these crime families, they have like their tentacles in so many different factions and so much money incoming from a lot of underground covert operations and front groups. That's the way that I've looked at it over the last couple of weeks. This is a pattern with these families.
Yes.
Okay, I'm about done with this. The enormous sums of money deposited into the Union Bank prior to 1942 is the best evidence that Prescott Bush knowingly served as a money launderer. Again, we have that pattern of money laundering, as we did with the Clinton family and the Clinton Foundation. for the Nazis. Remember that Union Bank's books and accounts were frozen by the U.S. alien property custodian in 1942 and not released back to the Bush family until 1951. At that time, Union Bank shares representing hundreds of millions of dollars worth of industrial stocks and bonds were unblocked for distribution. Okay. Did the Bush family really believe that such enormous sums came from the Dutch enterprises? Not likely. One could sell tulip bulbs and wooden shoes for centuries and not achieve those sums. A former a fortune this size could only have come from the decent profits made from rearming the Third Reich and then hidden first from the Nazi tax auditors and then from the Allies. Okay. Well, there's a lot more to go into there, but we're coming up on the hour mark here, and I'm not gonna read any more from here right now. You can read that on your own, the rest of the article. But I found it really interesting, very interesting that again we see money laundering in these uh, oligarchical family legacies.
Yeah.
Okay, Tim?
Yeah, I completely agree. It's crazy how much they do in so many different areas, all over the place. Hey, Crystal, you've got a little bit of an echo.
I have an echo because my mic's open and yours is open. I think that's why.
Oh, all right. At any rate, there's money laundering everywhere. I mean, there's laws that they put in place on a country level, and these people circumvent them. It's almost like there's two separate financial systems. Like you have the shadow government, these people who run things in the shadows, they have their own system, and that's like all the offshore banking and all that stuff. That's what they do to hide their money from anybody who wants to find it. And they've obviously been doing this for a very, very long time. As much as possible as the modern age has seen more and more financial laws. Like if they get blocked somehow, they just find ways around it because their show must go on, and that's what they do. They're basically merchants of death, and that's a good way to put the Bush company. They're the Bush. You're gonna call them the Bush Company of Death. That's what we call them instead of saying the Bush family. They actually. So same with the. Ooh, we have Noreen joining us just before the top of the hour here, so bringing her in.
Hey,
Hello.
Noreen.
Ooh, you know what? Before there's a break or before I forget, just a quick correction on pronunciation is no big deal. I think it's Alan Dulles. I can look that up. I think because I know there's a Dulles Airport that I went to once, and I think it's the same person that they named after. And then Germany, Munich. I think. I mean, I don't know the actual German pronunciation, but we refer to it as Americans. We say Munich, Germany. It's not Munich. It's Munich. Yeah. It's like. Other than that, I was listening to all your information about the Bushes, and they're involved in many things. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's actually pretty crazy. Noreen, you've got a crazy echo.
Okay, hold on.
Hmm?
Let's see. Better?
Yes, sounds like it. Thank you very much.
All right.
So yeah, we got about 5 minutes till the top of the hour. Maybe 3, by the way. And yes, thank you very much for the mispronunciations, because after I said what I said, I don't remember how I pronounced Munich before. I couldn't pick up I couldn't remember. And then after Crystal, you had said it, I was like, wait a minute, that's not right. And I was like, wait, it's Munich. And then Noreen is like, yeah, it's Munich, and I'm like, dang it.
You know what that shows to me? That what proves to me when we can't pronounce these words is that in our personal lives, we don't have enough people around us that use these words to know the pronunciation. What information we're probably gathering on the internet and don't hear those words pronounced or used verbatim in our everyday dialogue.
Well, you want to know something? I will be honest. One of the reasons why I think I know about Dulles, I wasn't sure about who Alan Dulles was until more recently, but because when I was younger, we went on a family trip to Virginia/Washington, D.C. in the East Coast, and we did land at Dulles Airport. That's how I remembered. And then when I heard the name Alan Dulles, and then he was involved in these things, and I think the airport that I'm looking at, yeah, it's an international, it's Washington Dulles International Airport, and I think it was named after Alan Dulles, I would think.
Yes,
Yeah,
I
I
do
can look
believe
that
you're
up.
correct. Yeah, he did a lot of favors for the Bushes. He was the guy who helped establish the CIA when it rolled over into the CIA from
Oh,
the
I'm
OSS.
sorry.
And he was
I'm mistaken. Excuse me for interrupting you. I'm mistaken here. Maybe it's the same family that oh, you know what? Could be the same family because I heard. Okay, the airport. This is a good thing I looked at the airport. The airport is named after John Foster Dulles, the 52nd Secretary of State, who served under Eisenhower. However, I will tell you, Allen might be related. Let me look that. Yeah, it's unimportant, okay, but it is kind of interesting to see the connections. So yeah, I was gonna say Dulles would be Alan, and then I think John Foster. I think they're brothers. Is what I had heard, and you know what? This is ironic. You talked over the Bush family. I'll tell you why. Because I think Alan, yes, it looks like they are. Because I think that they were involved in a lot of bad stuff together. Yes, the brothers, John Foster Dulles, Alan Dulles, and their secret world. Let me put this link in for you when it comes up. See, isn't that interesting? This is a book. Okay, it's called The Brothers, John Foster Dulles, Alan Dulles, and Their Secret World War. Let me put this link in for you. Isn't that amazing how you keep digging and digging and you know what I
find more
mean?
pieces of the puzzle. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah. This is from Amazon. I'm just putting this in for you here, and I'll put it in chat probably in a minute. But yeah, there it is. See, that's a book.
Excellent. Yeah,
Yeah.
so it's named after the brother, and they're both involved, and that doesn't surprise me in the slightest
No.
because of these people's preference for keeping the everything in the family. Well, we're here at the break now, so we'll be joining everybody in a few minutes. Stay tuned. Hello, everyone. We are back live here at Revising Reality. If you want to follow along with the research again, go ahead, head on over to www.revisingreality.com. And we are on a listener-supported radio station, Revolution Radio, or freedomslips.com. So thank you very much for joining us. How are you guys? Still here?
I'm here. I'm good. I'm
Yeah.
over here looking for a PDF for you guys.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's right. For that book, the brothers John Foster Dulles, Ellen Dulles, and their Secret World War. That that is pretty indicting.
It
Even the
is.
title, huh? It's like really hardcore. It does connect the dots to these other, persons too, like Bush and Eisenhower, and like you were saying.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, Alan Dulles was actually the lawyer for Union Banking Corporation, which Crystal mentioned is
Hmm.
who owned this bank was Prescott Bush and Herbert Walker. Well, I should say George Herbert Walker. So these people, they basically help money launder and keep the big business out of trouble. I mean, we're talking about the Dulles, and there was actually the
It's
reason
Dulles. I
why.
think it's a
Sorry,
Dulles, not
Dulles.
Dulles, Dulles. Yeah. Mhm.
Anyway,
Just
Dulles.
I just think of Dallas, the city of Dallas. Replace it with a U, Dulles. I think that's yeah. Mhm.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure that's or as I hear because I remember landing at the airport and they kept saying this Dulles International. So it's just think of Dallas without the A, Dulles.
yeah, Dulles. Anyway, the other Dulles, well, the one Dulles that John, who is his name is enshrined uh in that airport. Like I said,
Mm-hmm.
his law firm was the one who had the contract for the Union Banking Corporation and many other of Bush's businesses. And so they had this big connection there as well. And then whenever Eisenhower got into office, Eisenhower, who happened to be good golfing buddies with Prescott Bush, um, Eisenhower went ahead and promoted them to high power connections, high power positions in his government. So he got Alan Dulles got director of the CIA, and John, what did John get? I don't remember. Did they mention it? Because I want to know. Yeah, wait a second. It says so in his wiki article. In John Dulles' wiki article, it says what his position was. No, in a second, I'm looking it up really quick because I want to make sure we really connect the dots on this.
Mm-hmm.
Because John Foster was in office. He was a United States senator too, actually.
Oh, that's it says John Foster Dulles was Secretary of State.
Oh yeah, there it is. That's
Oh,
what I
yeah.
was looking for.
All
Yeah,
right.
he was Secretary of State, but before he was also a United States senator.
Oh, okay. All right.
So this guy is obviously well connected.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
At any rate, he Dulles was his first act. His first act as director of the CIA was to create MK Ultra. All right,
Oh,
we've
really?
discussed, yes,
Wow.
we've discussed it, and he tried to destroy all the files about its existence, but it came back out obviously because we know about it. He also, like we were talking about, like starting these world wars. Okay, so not only do these guys have connections to Bush and the Nazis, but they also Dulles was responsible for the coups in Guatemala and Iran.
That's right. Yeah.
So he set up a government. Even though it was supposed to fight against communism, he set up a government that in Iran, which was a dictatorship. The follow was a brutal dictatorship in Iran for over 20 years. They were so pro-U.S. That they continued to support them. Even we considered to support them as in the United States, even though they had police which silenced dissenters. They weren't overthrown over communism like thought. So there's another thing about it because they have the oil supply there. Iran was supporting the oil supply until the Shah collapsed. The dictatorship in Iran set up by the U.S. was the most brutal to the people living there. It is no surprise that in 1979, when the Shah was finally overthrown, this government would be at its core anti-U.S. and it has. And then ever since they broke free.
Right.
Oh, I see. Is that from the chat, Lorraine?
Yeah, I'm gonna pull up this link and see what. Yeah, B. Radley from chat. So then he found a bunch of stuff on Let's see here.
Start page. That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. On this site.
And
Let's see.
thanks
Wow,
for that.
that's crazy.
By the way.
Yeah, thank you, B. Radley. Start page. Oh, well, I don't know. Let me see. Just write Dulles Brothers. Never used this. Yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say, like the he also created the devised the Bay of Pigs. This is the one, obviously.
My gosh, yeah, you're right, because it said, did CIA Director Allen Dulles order the hit on JFK even? Speaking of Bay of Pigs.
We were getting to
Oh
that,
my gosh.
Yeah.
Oh, look. Wow, that's crazy.
Yes.
Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
So they went ahead with the invasion, obviously, because Kennedy, he stopped it. Which is very interesting because eventually he launched an investigation after the Bay of Pigs, or during the Bay of Pigs, which eventually got Dulles fired. Dulles, by the way, may have been connected to Project Northwoods, which, if anybody who studied 9/11 should know, that Project Northwoods was the plane they were going to fly as a part of this Bay of Pigs thing. They were going to try to convince the American public that the Cubans were doing terrorism on United States soil and fly planes into buildings and other such things. Just think about that and tie it to 9/11, and this was back in the 1960s. So, and then Kennedy, obviously, so he got Dulles fired, but Dulles is still affiliated with one more event because Lyndon Johnson appointed Dulles a position to decide if Kennedy's assassination was a conspiracy or not. A man fired by Kennedy was part of the commission to prove that there was a conspiracy or not, which we call the Warren Report. They concluded no conspiracy had happened and relied solely on the FBI report and did no extra investigating. Later, an investigation by the House Select Committee on Assassins concluded that JFK assassination was probably the result of a conspiracy. They also reviled what the CIA called Operation Mockingbird. This is also supervised by Allen Dulles, and this was the operation that controlled the media outlets, which is still running, but not on the same name. So this guy, he's committed a number of acts that have corrupted the United States.
Oh, major him, yeah.
Oh yeah, and he's also been a part of a big deal of suspicious actions and groups. He's responsible for, the original mind control experiments, at least as far as the CIA is concerned. because they've been doing that for hundreds of years, I'm sure. Sure that the elites have been doing that sort of a thing.
Yes.
He tried to overthrow the Guatemalan government, the Iranian government, and then which in turn let the fundamentalists who now control it, take it over. Because as a blowback, as consequence of this, which leads to the Iran-Iraq War, which and the current problems today leading into Iran. He's responsible for Operation Mockingbird.
Mm-hmm.
The government is in a sense controlled media after the 1950s. Most of it, though, he is part of a suspicious commission which deemed the JFK assassination a conspiracy. And which, by the way, there's one of the guys who was on that commission was murdered over not wanting to sign it as a thing, and that would be Hale Boggs. His plane disappeared after he was thinking about coming to a different conclusion than the one that the report actually did, because he was regretting signing his name to it. Because the seventh member of the Warren, out of the seven-member Warren Commission, there were three dissenters, which would be Senator Sherman Cooper, Senator Richard Russell, and Congressman Hale Boggs. As journalist Jim Marrs pointed out, the most vocal critic among the commission members was Hale Boggs. Boggs became frustrated with the panel's reliance on the FBI for information. Speaking for the single bullet theory, Boggs once commented, "I have strong doubts about it." On April 1st, 1971, House Majority Leader Boggs delivered a blistering attack on FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover, charging that under his dictatorship, the FBI had adopted the tactics of the Soviet Union and Hitler's Gestapo. I don't even know how you say
Is it Gespato or something? Gespato?
Right, Noreen.
Gespato, something like that, yeah.
Gespato. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Boggs, who undoubtedly would have become the Speaker of the House and a powerful ally in any reopening of the JFK assassination investigation, vanished on October 16, 1972, on a military junket flight to Alaska. Despite a massive search, no trace of the Boggs airplane had ever been found. 7 years later, after Hale Boggs' death in 1972, a colleague of his wife, Lindy, who was elected to fill her late husband's seat in Congress, recalled Mrs. Boggs remarking, "Hale felt very, very torn during his work on the commission. He wished he had never been on it, and he wished he'd never signed the Warren Report." And that is from Bernard Furstewald in a book called Coincidence or Conspiracy. So there's another guy, who was killed in the connection to the Bushes. He was killed in connection with Dulles. Obviously because they were on the same commission together, the same report, because Dulles was appointed to that. So it's very interesting to see, all these people that are very much connected high up there, and the Dulles brothers, helping out the Bushes and establishing all these things that they, are destabilizing to the world, killing people, harming other people, getting these people to expand their money laundering business all over the place. I mean, that's what they do. It's crazy. It's sad. But it's so huge that it's connected to everything. This is the point. This is the point to be taken away from this. We're looking at the details of these people's, empires, but these empires are still in control today, and even more so. The control is even more transparent because we don't see anything that resembles real journalism taking place in any mainstream, news media source. This is right in front of our eyes. A lot of people. That they did a. I remember reading. It was less than a year ago, and I remember reading this survey that was done, a bunch of surveys, and just every single time they do this, like the confidence that the public seems to have in the mainstream media, even the people who are under the spell, so to speak, they're either distrusting it or they're stopping to rely on it as much. People are now relying upon the internet way more. We've crossed a tipping point with that. There's still, you have the old card or whatever, or people that just kind of watch it because they have nothing better to do, even if they know they're being lied to. I know plenty of people like that. Even if they know that it's probably a suspect, like they'll still watch it for some reason or another. I don't understand why. It's completely illogical to me.
That's what I was about to say. I'm sorry, Noreen. I was about to say I concur with what you just said, Tim, about I don't understand why people continue to watch mainstream media news outlets when they're already consciously aware that most of the 99% of the information shared in these news outlets like Fox, MS, I don't even know them anymore.
MSN.
Yes, right. Thank you, Noreen. She is so helpful.
Yes.
Um, I like that last name too, Help Hand,
It's ironic.
because she's always giving a helping hand, and I admire that about you, Noreen. Thank you. But yeah, I don't understand. I was speaking to an older gentleman the other day, and he agrees with me for the most part about how the government needs to basically be overthrown, smash the state, right? But he still wants to continue uh, to rally and potentially vote for Trump. And I'm trying to persuade my friend here not to vote. And that was a part of the information that we've shared this past week, Tim,
Yeah.
about unregistering to vote, not giving your consent to this government, and I just wanted to add that in there while I had the opportunity.
For that matter, wherever you live on the planet, I mean, if that's your philosophy, I'm just saying, then nobody should be voting anywhere on the globe, because it's all, in some respect, it's all connected to the same system, right? I mean, if you look at it deeply.
Oh yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
anywhere you
Exactly.
go, yeah, anywhere you go, like, why in the world would you participate in a system that is at 90% corrupted? I mean, you might find countries here and there where there might be less corruption, quote
Right.
unquote. I'm putting that in things, but if you're
Sure.
talking about a government, I mean, a government is technically defined as a territorial monopoly on force and violence. So, in other words, you got a mafia that writes its own laws. That is all a government is. It's all it ever will be. They draw lines on a map and they say, well, we own this place, and anybody who lives here is our slave. That's basically the premise. I mean, they can refer to
Yeah.
people as chattel or cattle. I mean,
Right.
you could do that because it's a tax
Yeah.
farm. You live on a
I have
tax farm.
a take on what you're saying. Yeah, you're right. I have a take a little bit on what you're saying about governments and people's trust in them. And let's put aside voting, because that's one aspect, but there's so many levels. I mean, we can include it too, but I'm just saying there's so many levels of government. Just to give you, I guess, what do you call it? Perspective about what can happen to people's minds. Ironically, I mean, this is rather ironic. Today I was, after work, I was with my friend for a little bit. He's not a dumb person. He's somewhat aware. I would say he has some awareness, but not completely. And we had an interesting talk, because it could have went into an argument and I stopped, but we're friends and it didn't really explode at all. But I started thinking about what you guys were talking about why do people still watch Fox or local news or whatever, or MSN or whatever. Okay. And then me and him started talking about food. I think it was food or drugs or something. Why? I don't know. And I told him this is absolutely false. He goes, Noreen, he goes, I trust the FDA. If the FDA says it's good, it's good. And he meant it. And I'm like, really? I don't want to use his name. He's a dear friend of mine. I go, you sure about that? He goes, yes. And I go, look, this is my research. I kind of threw in the fact that I have this little show on the station. That doesn't mean everything. Okay. But I said to him, I go, look, I do research because I have a show, but just in general, I do occasionally anyway. And from what I know from the inside, looking at all this stuff, you know, FDA is just a government agency and they're just as corrupt as anything. And I will tell you, after talking about it for a few minutes with him, I got a sense from him that at least his brain started open. I mean, I'm talking just like an inch open to my telling him that that is a corrupt agency, and I would not necessarily bank on trusting their word about what we take into our bodies. I just plain out told him. And he did start to kind of understand, but really, I didn't hear him say, "Oh, I would like to research that and I would like to explore that further." But he did. I could sense by his body language that it was maybe like it was more kind of like he was saying, "Well, maybe." He was giving the big M, maybe. Okay, and then we kind of ended it there. But oh, by the way, Crystal, did she drop off?
Yeah, but we'll
Um,
continue, and then we'll get her back as soon as she gets her internet fixes
well,
itself.
yeah, we want her back. So, Crystal, come back if you can. Anyway, I was just saying that, here's a person who's not really stupid, but what I think my bottom line that I got from that conversation was that people want to stay in a state of denial. Does that make sense? I think, because I started thinking about his
Hello?
mentality, and I've known him a long
Hello.
time. I started thinking he's not stupid. He has some awareness, but he was a little bit initially extremely resistant to what I was saying. It has got to be, you guys, it absolutely has to be denial.
It is. It's definitely got a lot to do with Noreen just dropped too. Okay. Anyway, it has everything to do with um
I don't know what that was all about. Suddenly the call dropped. There was nothing going on. I wasn't doing anything. Um, and call was dropped. I had it for a second. Call dropped, and then you called me back, and I was able to connect. That's really unfortunate. I
yeah,
hope
it is. It's
Noreen
okay.
is able to.
I think
Not
she's
really.
back already.
I hope
See?
so, because she was
I'm here.
sharing something really interesting. Go ahead, Noreen. I was listening to you before we were rudely interrupted.
Oh yeah, no, it's okay, you guys. I mean, it's Skype. I just was telling. I know you dropped off, and now I was just telling Tim that with my friend, I did make some. There's like a tiny dent in his thinking about. I could tell his mind opened up an inch to the possibility that the FDA was maybe corrupt. So I mean, I opened it an inch, but I could tell it wasn't like 100% convincing to him. But it was just me like taking a wrench and going, opening it just a little bit. So I think people, yeah, I think people are in denial. That's what
Yes.
struck me about that.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
was gonna say, it definitely is. It's a form of denial because we're looking at like the information is controlled from all angles. Like if you're in the public school system or wherever you're schooled, they're gonna teach you the same exact things, the same exact false history that they want you to see. They want to paint the U.S. in the perfect light. They paint the picture that they want to paint, and then you people grow up, they expecting to follow all these rules. Like you get fined or punished by the cops if you break them. Like it's very much like they set up the entire way countries are set up as if the state is your father, and you're so, as a human being, you can't even take care of yourself, that they have to take care of you. That's
And
kind of the whole.
it's a global issue, as we were saying. This is all over the world.
Oh
It's
yes.
got, I mean, you might as well live in a jungle. No offense. You might as well live in a tribe in a jungle, remotely far from everything, to be untouched. But even those people are not 100% untouched because there's variables that enter into where they live geographically and all that stuff. So yeah, no, I mean, it's actually global craziness. I mean,
It
yeah.
is. I have a YouTube video which isn't very long that I want to play on this subject of the hidden hand and the people who
Hmm.
control the world. Actually, it's really cool. Um, so I'm gonna play that, and then
I
we're
was
gonna open
happy
up
I was
to.
able to find that, Tim. Really, that was good stuff.
So yes, I like. Anyway, I'm gonna play this, and then we're going to open up for call-ins if somebody wants to call in, and then we'll continue on. So let me hit the right buttons here.
It isn't the first time that men who express reverence for democracy in public have violated the values of democracy in practice. The secret government is an interlocking network of official functionaries, spies, mercenaries, ex-generals, profiteers, and super patriots who, for a variety of motives, operate outside the legitimate institutions of government. Presidents have turned to them when they can't win the support of the Congress or the people, creating that unsupervised power so feared by the framers of our Constitution. Just imagine that William Casey's dream came true. Suppose the enterprise grew into a super-secret, self-financing, self-perpetuating organization. Suppose they decided on their own to assassinate Gorbachev or the leader of white South Africa. Could a president control them? And what if he became the enterprise's public enemy number one? Who would know? Who would say no?
See, the problem with this society is that people still believe that somehow voting will actually make a difference. But when they start to learn and educate themselves about the true fabric of the world and the true fabric that makes up this corporation called America, you start to realize that America has been ran orchestrated and controlled by a government or a shadow government for a very, very, very long time. And until people, whether you are a Democrat, Republican, black, white, Christian, whatever label you give yourself, until you realize that we will always be submissive, we will always be under the thumb or the boot of tyranny.
I learned that Barbie was really such a brutal murderer, I reported this to my headquarters and I thought I was going to get a promotion. I thought there was a big picture of a deal I had here, you know. And the answer was, Dabbringhouse, keep quiet until he's no longer useful, then we'll turn him over to the French. Under those conditions, I thought, well, okay, let's work with him. You know, if you're an intelligence officer, you work with the devil.
The Americans did not turn Barbie over to the French when they finished with him. They helped him escape to Bolivia. Other top Nazis were smuggled into the United States to cooperate in the war against the new enemy. Dabbringhouse still remembers the attitude of his superiors. The new enemy was the only enemy.
They seem to have had a preconceived program of what the communists are up to. And if I send in a report that there was a Nazi war criminal running around over there, forget it. We're not interested in the Nazis anymore. We're concentrating on the communists.
So began the morality of the Cold War. Anything goes. The struggle required a mentality of permanent war, a perpetual state of emergency. And it meant a vast new apparatus of power that radically transformed our government. Its foundations were laid when President Truman signed into law the National Security Act of 1947.
Now, that National Security Act of 1947 changed dramatically the direction of this great nation. It established the framework for a national security state.
Admiral Jean LaRocque rose through the ranks from ensign to become a strategic planner for the Pentagon, and now heads the Center for Defense Information, a public interest group.
The National Security Act of 47 gave us the National Security Council.
Never have we had a National Security Council so concerned about the nation's security that we are always looking for threats and looking how to orchestrate our society to oppose those threats. National security was invented, almost, in 1947, and now it has become the prime mover of everything we do is measured against something we invented in 1947. The National Security Act also gave us the Central Intelligence Agency.
The Central Intelligence Agency.
So it's no wonder that within this day and age, terrorism and terrorist attacks and psyops and hoaxes are being used at every single opportunity. Where now cop killings become the new norm, and groups backed by elements like George Soros are actually becoming more emboldened with each success. But if you really want to awaken yourself and your family members, you need to educate yourself about the intricate fabric of the shadow government and how it not only extends from America, or as I like to call Oceania, but it also engrasps and encompasses the entire planet. Because once you realize that, then you definitely realize it's 1984. Peace.
So that's that's listed on the show notes page. It's very, very well put how big the system is, how much their control extends to almost every facet of your life. It's so cyclical, in nature. It's systemic. And then you see the corruption everywhere, and people talk about the corruption, and nobody does anything about it. Like, everybody talks about the Clintons being war criminals, but nobody does anything about it. And everybody talks about how corrupt politicians are, but nobody bothers to go and have said apply that same basic filter to all politicians. And I don't understand why, people can stand by and just watch all this corruption and watch all this stuff go on and not do anything about it, or continue to vote, to continue to do the same things over and over and over and over again and expect there to be different results. You can't vote them out. The system itself will just replenish itself with other willing people to do their bidding.
Right. You'll just find another dragon in a cave somewhere. They'll just find another carbon copy, another clone, which the other day I was looking at Hillary Clinton and I swear by God, she's a freaking clone.
That's could very could very well be. You never know with these people. So I'm going to open this up for call-ins. If in case anybody wants to call in, there's 310-421-4053, since we now have reached the last past the last half hour of the show. So again, that's 310-421-4053 in case anybody likes to call in. If you want to find me on Skype, I think it's Timo Sobani. That's my Skype name, all one word. So if you want to, you can go ahead and call in the show to discuss, these topics or whatever questions or comments you may have. At any rate, yeah.
Well, there's been a lot of information, being shared on all this. That's for sure.
We do what we can in 2 hours. I kind of wish I had 3.
I wish I had longer than 3. Really, we need like a 4-hour episode, man. We need more blocks of time if that's any way possible.
Actually, on the schedule for Revolution Radio, now I don't know if it's your schedules, but I think Studio B might still have some openings, but that all depends on you guys, what you think of it. I know sometimes when I look, I see like gaps. I mean, to clarify to the audience, Revolution Radio generally more than 90% of the time or 95% of the time has continuous, airplay of something, whether it be live shows or replays or even music occasionally, but it's just a point or maybe a show of some kind, whether it be outside of the station. But basically Studio B has more free or open airtime. Again, it is always filled with something, but I was just suggesting to these two if they want to look at the time on there and see if they can, get something, I don't know, on Studio B, which you guys are broadcasting out of B right now anyway, but I was looking at I might take a look at it again and I saw some openings, but yeah.
Yeah, I've been thinking about doing some things to expand the show, which I am working on. I started working on it this week for, just putting a lot of time and effort into it. I like to try to treat this thing as a full-time job, and lately I've been going through a tough time, so I haven't really been doing it quite as much as I would like to. But, I mean, I've been doing lots of work as well. So in the near coming future, in the next 2 months, I'm going to work on getting rid of a job and focusing a lot more and opening up some more stuff. If we end up doing like YouTube broadcasts, could do that at some point. Could also do some other different types of broadcasts as well, just to expand Revising Reality and cover more topics as we go. But I do want to get
excited for that.
I do want to get more shows, more live broadcasts here would be nice. But that's a future scheduling concern because right now I have 2 jobs and I can't manage that.
Right.
It's like I said, I'm working on changing the things that are driving me nuts about my life. So, but this show is very important to me. I love talking about all the crazy information that I've learned and all the crazy information I continue to learn. I do want to announce at the moment, just so that everybody knows, James McKinney will be joining us for the next show.
Awesome.
So I will be putting up a show notes page about that and a link to his website and his books and stuff for everybody. He's a really cool guy. He knows a lot about the electric universe. He's been broadcasting for years, so he's a very interesting character. And we'll probably see a few more, even a couple of times, over the course of the show.
Wow.
So, yeah, back to the Bushes, I suppose, since we still have some time and nobody's called in. We have the Iran-Contra scandal is also another huge thing for the Bush, and that's coming more into more recent times because we were talking about the grandfather, and then we got into the Dulles, which is a pretty good bridge because the Dulles Dulles.
The Dulles. Just remember, Dallas without the A. Dulles. Just think of Dulles, like, your syllables, right? Like Dallas, Dulles. Just think of it. I'm smart. Just think of the city of Dallas, and you'll think of Dulles. That's how I remembered it.
I must be dyslexic. We'll just chalk it up. It's not the right thing, but whatever. At any rate, they do an awful lot of interesting things. And the Iran Contra scandal, the Iran Contra scandal was a huge deal in the 80s, and that also connects to Reagan. Now, a lot of people, I know a lot of conservatives, they constantly defend Reagan. There's no point in that. Like, the guy was crooked. Get over it. I hate that people hold him up like some kind of a, I hate
I
people
agree, like
hold
some
him
kind of
up.
icon.
Yes,
Like
exactly.
some kind of icon. He's none. Let me express myself right here for a moment. None of these presidents are worthy of your praise. No government official in legislation, the White House, Senate, whatever. None of them are a role model to you unless you like to be some authoritarian dominating force in other people's lives. None of them are worthy. I don't find Reagan worthy of praise. He did a couple of good movies and that's it. He was a actor, and that's all he was, really. He started a bunch of bullshit that could have been prevented had people wisened up years ago.
I completely agree. I mean, it's ridiculous how much, how much connections there are when you start to look at it. Like, I mean, we mentioned so much, and then all these people are still involved. I mean, even if you just want to go into what the left was kept, because sometimes the political parties have their, good quirks and bad quirks, because it's funny because they're against each other so much. Sometimes the people who are really involved with one side or the other will do an awful lot of research on the other side and actually show things that could be pushing it for like the normal sphere of things. Like if you look at the right, they have the Rush Limbaugh, and the left, you had all the research that was done on the Bushes during the Bush administration, talking about how they were war profiteering, and nobody believed them because they always just painted them as the opposition. And then it's like plausible deniability. Only half the population would even be interested in this, quote unquote half. But just see what I'm saying, like they do every now and again have their their uses, because they do sometimes discuss this sort of stuff, but they only do it like the right wing, when during the Vince Foster incident, with Hillary in the White, or with Hillary and Bill in the White House. The right wing conspiracy people were all over that. But it's funny how they won't look at their own people. Like I said, like Reagan is some kind of a hero to these people, and Reagan wasn't a good guy. I mean, he started the war on drugs, and profited, from all of it, thanks to.
Don't forget Star Wars. That,
Yeah.
to me, is like, that's what stands out. Other than the drug wars, Star Wars. And one of these days, Tim, I'd like us to do a broadcast on that, if you consider it.
Oh yeah, I would love to, and I would love to tie that into the predecessor. I shouldn't say the predecessor of Star Wars. I should say, well, it ties both into the predecessors of Star Wars, because there were predecessors, and I mean like research on space travel before, way before, maybe 60, 70 years. We're talking the late 1930s, early 1930s, into space travel on planet Earth by some of these people who are connected to the people that we've been talking about all this time. They have done, and they still do, advanced research into things that we don't, isn't within the public domain. And then by that's where they dump all this money into the black budget, and that's one of the ways that they get the money, is through drug dealing or through money laundering and all these arms dealing. Like we discussed how Hillary would take money into the Clinton Foundation from as Secretary of State. You know, in official, she would take money from these countries, and then she would unofficially sell them weapons. Now I mean, that's a good deal she's got going on there. She's taking it to the bank too and laughing all the way. I mean, I'm hoping that, you know, eventually people want to get up and actually do something about this, because it's going to take human beings either completely disengaging from the system and looking for alternative solutions, or it's going to take human beings, you know, rising up in arms. I mean, I don't really honestly don't like violence as far as like it goes according to natural law. On the other hand, you could definitely analyze it that they've done enough damage to us that it's finally time for that. But you know, you require a lot of people to finally get fed up enough with this system. I mean, we look at the 2016 presidential elections, and I'm looking at this and I'm going, how in the world do people not even get it yet? Like, how in the world do people still continue to watch one side or the other? Even when it's all the cards are on the table at this point. Like, people understand that Hillary is a war criminal, yet some people still, you know, want to vote for her. Not very many people, obviously. I've only met a few, very, very small handful of people who would consider voting for Hillary Clinton. And then, you know, you have on the other hand Donald Trump. Now, I know a lot of people who keep saying, "Well, Trump's better than Hillary," and that's about all the better that they can put it. Like, every time I bring up the fact that he's been friends with the Clintons for many, many years. As a matter of fact, I think in one of the articles we listed, or I listed on the show notes page, I think it's close to the bottom. Trump is pictured in a childhood photo with the Clintons, or a very early photo. It was pretty. It's crazy how long these people have been friends. It's crazy how well connected they are. You can't get big in the business and not be politically connected and somehow able to be controlled. Um, I think it's kind of ridiculous that people just kind of gloss this stuff over and think that it's, you know, well, we have to vote for somebody. Well, no, you don't. I mean, the alternative is all obviously to just unregister, or at the very least, just don't vote at all. You know, I mean, this whole thing is designed to trump up public. How should I put this? Participation. They want you to consent to, you know, these people ruling over you. When you cast a vote, technically, according to the system, you're basically saying that, oh, I voted for this person, so therefore, even though it's probably logical that he's going to screw everybody over somehow or another, I'm still going to vote for him, and whatever he does, I signed off on it. I mean, technically, that isn't a stretch of the truth. You know, we as human beings, like, we're being ruled, we are being cajoled, we're being pushed around, we're being told what we can and cannot do, and we are being treated like children. And are you a child? I mean, if you're listening to the show right now, ask you that question honestly. Like, does somebody else have the right to tell you what you can and cannot do? Do you have a right to tell your neighbor what they can and cannot do? Because if you don't have a right to tell your neighbor what they can and cannot do, as long as they are not harming you, then how does some politician hundreds of miles away have a right to tell you what you can and cannot do? How does some guy with a gun and a badge have a right to force you to pay money because you were going a little bit too fast for his radar gun? And it defended the radar gun, so therefore you have to give him money that's going to benefit his department. I mean, seriously, like, how long can we let this sham go on? Because they can't really technically tell us to do anything. Technically, human beings are free, and we should just act like it. But we don't. We act like whipped dogs. We act like people who are slaves. Continue to pay the taxes. Continue to devote to buy the lies, to swallow this machine. And that's not what we were designed to do. I mean, do you think that that's what human beings were designed to do? Is this all life is supposed to be? You know, running around in like a rat in a cage, to quote.
Oh, that's the band. You're right. They did a song like that. I know who you're talking about. Right.
Cage. It's why can't I remember that band?
I know the song. It's playing in my head right now.
I'm gonna look this up. I interrupted my rant, but I'm gonna look this up. 1 second. Because I know who this is. Smashing Pumpkins. Yeah, I didn't.
That's it, right?
Bullet with a butterfly.
Yes, I love that song. Bullet for the Butterfly Wings. Everybody's seeing it. Like, people are fed up now. I mean, look at the unemployment rate. If you go to shadowstats.org, which I will do as I rant, you know, the unemployment rate is much higher than what is what is reported.
Really did start ranting too.
I did too, because
I
I
love
had this
that.
one coming for a while, because everywhere I look, I go to work and I hear these people saying stupid things, and I walk around town or whatever it is, and I hear people saying stupid things. If I'm out and about and hear people saying stupid things, it drives me
You're
nuts.
surrounded by stupidity.
This should be your 2 hours to vent.
Oh, it
I mean,
is.
think
Yeah.
of it as your 2 hours to vent. Hey, and I've got to have a little bit of room here. But,
So
but
yeah,
think of
one
it.
second. I just want to say
There's that.
statusstats.org. It's up to about 24 or 23.5% unemployment rate, which is the shadowstats.org figures. Actually, it says 22.9. There we go. It's perfect. So that's June 2016, and it has gone up and stayed around the same place at the current point. Now,
Another thing. Oh, go ahead.
I
Go
was going
ahead.
to say, this is the seasonally adjusted SGS alternate employment rate. It reflects current unemployment reporting methodology adjusted for SGS long-term disclosed workers who were defined out of official existence in 1994. That estimate is added to the BLS estimate of U6 unemployment, which includes short-term discouraged workers. The U3 unemployment rate number is the monthly headline number. The U6 is the I can never say Bureau, right? Bureau of Labor Statistics,
That's correct.
BLS, broadest unemployment measure, including short-term discouraged and other marginally attached workers, as well as those forced to work part-time because they cannot find full-time employment. So that's at 22.9%, much higher than the normal. Than right now, the official government stats are 5%. And anybody who looks around or tries to get a job will tell you that it isn't that easy. And that, I mean, every time I glance at the stupid newspaper, which I hate to, but I will because I don't trust anything they say, you find stories about, people losing their jobs. You find stories about, companies going out of business. A couple of big ones just went out around here. Somebody's trying to convince me that there's a recovery going on because it just sounds like fantasy. I mean, it sounds like BS. I mean, it's ridiculous.
I agree with you, and there's some interesting things that you mentioned within those statistics. If you even go deeper with that, think about what they're trying to do is you know, they can whitewash it. They can say that, well, psychically, what is cyclically, something goes up because, say, for example, like you were saying, part-time workers, okay, they didn't find full-time jobs, but they did find a part-time job. And so that's going to up the numbers of naturally somewhat. However, let's compare this to, say, 30, 40 years ago, right? You can't even compare the rates because I think back then, even if you have cyclical downturns for employment, even say 40 years ago, it's not like it is today where people either they're purposely, hiring people part-time so they don't have to give them insurance and benefits. And then number two, also, they're not giving, even for full-time workers, they're not giving the entire packages of retirement that they used to or benefits. And then also, I think, people, what they're doing now is I'm noticing, because I'm kind of a part-time worker. I'm not going to get too into that situation, but the thing is, think about it. If you're what's going on is I'm noticing the part-time workers, not all, many, they're either underemployed because again they're not supposed to be getting these benefits. Then I know people that are fully employed, but it's like the companies don't want to hire new people, so they'll hang on to the full-time worker and then just make them work overtime. So then you got this imbalance of people that are, maybe they feel maybe they're not getting enough hours, and other people are like just being overworked. And then somehow this is doctored into these numbers. So then you could say, they could twist it and say, well, this one went up, this one went kind of down. But again, this all has to do with, like, situational things and cycles. I believe it's also cycles. But I really just want to say this one last thing. I really feel the recession of, what is it? Oh, is it 07 or 08? Whenever
Yeah,
the big,
08.
oh wait, yeah, that one. I will tell you that really made, I think, a very, very impacting situation on this country, because even though there's been other recessions in, U.S. history, the difference with this one is it seems like it affected many areas, and it also forced the economy to become more, quote, technological, computer based, dependence on internet, which is okay, that's maybe okay, but it just really shifted a lot of things, so there's
Oh yeah.
so many. Yeah.
It,
Yeah.
it was planned. It was
Yeah,
planned. It was
definitely.
executed. they have control over the markets. They can do what they want. They fix them all. They fix the gold price. They fix the silver prices. That was
Right.
even recently admitted to, that they fixed the silver prices. J.P. Morgan, thank you very much. So all of this stuff, like they can control it all. Then they do control it all. I mean, there are things that happen every now and again that are organic, but for the most part, like the major events, all of it's scripted. Like the world plays to the tune of their fiddle, for lack of a better terminology. And they all they don't care. They don't care. And I should say that the 2008 financial collapse actually technically isn't even over. I mean, you could
No.
say that it finished, but it really didn't. We're still
No.
technically in depressionary status right now, even though all you ever hear on the mainstream news media is that, oh, it's a recovery, it's a recovery, it's a rough recovery, but it's a recovery. We're driving home drunk, but eventually we'll be sober.
Well, the difference between this depression and the one of the 30s, there is one big difference, and this is just all, is that in the 30s, because there were so many people that were in soup kitchen lines or whatever, that's why you had FDR. He created, all these programs as, Social Security, blah, 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 this and that. And I think right now the difference is that many people are on either, subsidies, whether they be Social Security, unemployment, food stamps, other housing, whatever. So you have more people on that now, I think, than ever. So that is an interesting point that you made about this being a depression, but of a different kind, where people are dependent somewhat on bureaucracy, which started in the last depression and then has continued until now.
Yeah, they're basically covering it up, because if people can't get jobs, then the government's just paying them. The problem is, eventually the United States will end up ceasing to be able to have the opportunity to ship all its debt overseas. And as that happens, the currency returns home. And when the currency returns home, you have hyperinflation, because the United States has way stretched its currency, and we're still printing insane amounts of money every day. So the funny thing is, all the money's fake. The confidence game is about up. And the time is running out for these people. I think it's interesting to see what happens next. If people are stupid enough to allow them to have another chance, or if we're finally going to man up and say, we're human beings. We actually should take our own destiny into our own hands.
They don't want us to do that, though. So
no, but I think I don't give a
I know, right? Exactly.
Yeah, I don't care about what they want.
Right. No,
We
well,
got
neither.
about
None of us do, but they're gonna try to put blocks. So they're gonna try to block us from it. And I think Crystal just dropped out again, but she'll come back.
Yeah, we got about 4 minutes left of the show. We're about to end up here. I was gonna ask Crystal to lead us out, but
you'll have to do it. It's cool. Well, I appreciate you inviting me again, as usual, and it's always fun to participate if I can. You guys really do your research. Clapping, yay, thumbs up to you guys.
Go ahead and plug your show.
Oh yeah, that'll be United States Eastern Standard Time tomorrow. Well, yeah, that's for us here in the U.S. Wild at Heart Roundtable, Studio A. That would be 12 a.m. Tuesday, according to the Eastern Standard Time. Yeah. Thank you.
Yes, and this is Revising Reality, and we are on, obviously, Sunday nights at 10 p.m. every Sunday, and my website...
Studio B, and you're on Studio B.
Yes, we're on Studio B. And next week we will have James McKinney on. And we have a website called www.revisingreality.com. You can also go to the Facebook page, where we keep everything updated on new research and current developments and stuff like that. And post memes, participate in the meme war, because who doesn't participate in the meme war? It's awesome. Yeah, so that's about it. Let's see here. I did want to cover something really quick, and that is, these criminals, they don't deserve, what we have, and we don't need to give it to them. So that's everything for this week, and I hope everybody has a good week. Thank you very much, and
And let's
Great
say
time.
goodbye to Crystal if she's hearing this. She's your co-host, and she'll be back on again. She dropped out because of Skype. But bye,
Yeah.
Crystal. See you next week, and thank you, Tim.
Thank you. Thank you, Crystal. Bye.